Good morning. In this brief episode, we are speaking to Dr. Mike Clarke, former Chief Executive of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds and currently an IEEP associate, to celebrate Natura 2000 Day and to salute all the efforts and achievements of everyone who is involved in nature conservation. I'm Anya, and an IEEP intern, and also currently a student at the Institute for European Studies. So, Mike is one of the heroes in this long-standing fight for biodiversity in the EU, with over 30 years of professional experience in European environmental policy. After stepping down from his role as Chief Executive of RSPB, he is now an associate in IEEP and provides advice to civil society, business, government sectors on environmental strategy and diplomacy. Dear Mike, this year's Natura 2000 Day shines a spotlight on young people and nature. Is there a very nice memory or very special moment in your own career related to conservation and to Natura 2000 that you would like to share with us today?
I've got so many. I have to go for two, maybe not one. So the first one was actually when I first started my professional career. And I became responsible for trying to protect the areas for nature where I grew up. I went back to where I used to be at school, and I was fighting the huge number of proposals in very early 1990 to develop all along down below the London in the wetlands of the Thames estuary. And one day I had to go out, and they'd already started pouring concrete. And I realized the only way we could stop this was through stronger laws than in the UK, through international legislation. And that was the moment I really realized we had to start campaigning internationally. And that was in 1990. And then in 2015, I was very proud to be part of the Nature Alert campaign to defend the nature directives. And at Brussels Green Week, we'd mobilized lots of people, the whole BirdLife International network that I'm a council member of from around the world. And we had one of my dear friends from Africa, Achilles Biarunga, speaking to the European Parliament. And he said, Africa is watching, this is our nature too. And you could hear a pin drop. And then finally that week, the main person who spoke for nature alongside Frans Timmermans at the plenary at the end of Brussels Green Week, the campaign was going up by tens of thousands of people signing up every day. And you could see that even the most powerful politicians were realizing that people care. And it was the voice of young people who spoke for nature. And that made me incredibly proud.
Thank you very much for sharing it with us. It is very important to remember these moments as they give us strength and inspiration for further action. In reality, Natura 2000 has contributed a lot to biodiversity conservation and is considered a success. But there are still many of us and many actors who would think otherwise. Like, for example, people who use the land, in agriculture, in forestry. After working with different stakeholders on a variety of fronts for so many years, how would you describe the role Natura 2000 has played in people's lives, and especially in our quest for a better environment and for biodiversity?
The first thing to remember is a success. Yes, we need a lot more to be able to ensure that we can live alongside nature in the future. But it's been nowhere else in the world has got a protected area network that covers 18% of our land, 4% of our marine environments, and it just protects hundreds of habitats and thousands of species. And it's really unique in the world to have such a network. A lot of the issues, and actually IEEP has been one of the organisations that's brought the evidence base together over years for this. And that shows that most of the issues are actually around implementation. And certainly for farmers and foresters, especially the smaller family farms and forestry that is small scale, they don't have the capacity to deal with lots of complexity. And that is where implementation becomes so key. So we know that this can be made to work, and actually to keep the natural assets that these sectors of employment need, we know we've got to maintain that natural fabric of the environment. So we have to work together in the future. There's many ways that will contribute. Nature-based solutions is going to be a huge part of responding to climate. There's a whole farm to fork strategy to how we can make sure that we have regenerative agriculture that is good for people, for jobs, and for nature. And also we need to look more fundamentally at things like financial frameworks and how to invest in this future to make it possible for businesses to get the benefits that they, for like sharing the benefits they're delivering for the public as a whole. This is hugely complex. It requires a lot of evidence and a lot of complex policy. Those are areas where IEP has huge strengths, but actually fundamentally, this is about being able to imagine and have a vision for a new future. And that's really the rethink agenda, and think 2030 is where we need to be heading.
I totally agree with you that to have a vision is very important and is a key in this process. And it's great to see that many of our member states do have this vision, even though they're still failing to implement Natura 2000. So my question is, they are failing because of a lack of commitment. How can we encourage our governments to commit to nature conservation as they commit to economic growth? This lockdown and pandemic is making many of us, and especially younger generations, worried about the future and jobs, while our governments obviously are focusing on economic recovery and economic growth. So how can Natura 2000 help younger people to get the right type of skills for jobs which would ultimately contribute to sustainable economy?
Yeah, ultimately, all of these choices are political choices, but actually what that means is they're choices that you and I and everybody else helps make. And I think it's really important for people to be engaged in the policy making and political process. So that's the first thing to say. I think right now, we're in a moment where we just need to rethink the economy and rethink systemically, think at large scale. One of the things that lockdown has shown is that health beats GDP. So health is actually, governments have shown the health and security of citizens is more important than simply a very crude measure of economic output. And do you know what? We were already in a crisis before we went into the pandemic crisis. We were in a climate and a nature crisis, which is already impacting on people's lives and health, and it will get worse unless we choose to have a different future. And in many ways, I think what we need to do now, while we've had this lockdown in Europe, it shows that we need to be thinking about reframing the whole question that you've just posed to me in many ways. We need to be thinking about One Health. We need to be thinking about planetary health and human health as going together, and that is how we will have livelihoods in the future, that we can operate safely and have an economy. And this means we've got to rebuild and choose economics that are more sustainable. And this is all about skills for the future. I mean, this is young people will be the generation that has to grow and develop these skills, and they have the choice going forward.
I think that young people play a very important role in reframing of this question, as you said. But it has to do a lot with system of values. And the system of values are related and linked to our environment. So many young people nowadays have grown up in cities, and often they see nature as something alien and something distant. And actually, very few professions nowadays have not lost this sense of belonging to nature. And I think it's very much at the core of the problem. So in your opinion, how can Natura 2000 and its values become part of everyone's reality. How can we rediscover this somehow lost bond that people have with nature?
I think at the moment, there's a very famous song for the environmental movement that Joni Mitchell wrote. It's called Big Yellow Taxi. And there's a phrase in that about you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Well, do you know, actually, lockdown has given us the counterfactual of what it's like to live without access to green space, what it's like not to be able to just step outside and feel the wind in your hair and the sun on your face. People are really noticing the difference. And I think it is about deep change in culture and values. And this is a time, I think, right now. Sadly, this is not the real background behind me. This is a fantastic part of Scotland and a Natura 2000 site. But my well-being depends on being connected with nature. And we know that. We know that this really affects people's lives. And indeed, you can look right now on IEP's website, has got a brilliant briefing on health and well-being and nature. So I think this is a moment when we do really need to believe that we can have a different future. This is a really tough time. People are just losing jobs across the piece, across Europe. We've got people dying. This is a massive, massive crisis that we're in. But these are dark times. But actually, that's when the Natura 2000 network came out of. It came out of a vision of a continental-wide network of protected areas for nature, first of all in the First World War in North America, and eventually when peace came to Europe after the Second World War, that was when the proposals first started to the idea that you could have a Natura 2000 network. Light can come out of darkness, and this is a tough time for many, many people across Europe and across the world. But actually, it's a time when we can choose to have a different future if we want to create it for the next generation. It's going to be a generational task, but that's why it's going to be so important for young people to actually get involved in this agenda. And one of the places they need to go to be informed is the IEP and find out all the evidence that can help form their views to articulate for a better future.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was great to have you with us and to hear your thoughts. It was also great to be with you and to celebrate Natura 2000. So thank you very much, and let's fight and work for a better future for all.
Yeah, it's possible. It's right out there for us. Yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.